All right, I can't tell if this is working or not, but I'm going to do a few minutes and maybe Chris will text me, let me know what's going on. All right, here we are at the Beaufort National Cemetery, and it was started in 1863 by Abraham Lincoln. After the Battle of Port Royal, November 7th, 1861, the Union came into Beaufort, South Carolina, and took over the area. And, oh, there we go. Shannon, I think it might be working. It says, "Hi, Bill, thanks for letting me know." So the Union came in November 1861, took over the area, made Beaufort into a hospital town for the remainder of the Civil War. The Confederates never challenged the area, and so Beaufort was a hospital town. They brought the wounded Union soldiers. Most of them came by boat because the Union Navy controlled the harbor at Charleston with a blockade, and they controlled all of the Beaufort area. And hey Chris, you did it, all right. And so the Union would bring wounded soldiers by boat mainly to Beaufort, to the hospitals they set up here. They had 24 hospitals in downtown, including one for the Massachusetts 54th, which was the, if you've seen the movie Glory, that was Denzel Washington, Matthew Broderick. They had the African-American soldiers fighting with the Massachusetts 54th. And so since Abraham Lincoln declared this the Beaufort National Cemetery in 1863, they also have a copy of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address on the wall here. And I'll just read a few of the early words here from it. November 19th, 1863. Our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. And it goes on from there. Maybe some of you had to memorize that in history class. But the National Cemetery was begun here. Now, today we've got almost 30,000 veterans buried here. They've got almost 4,000 known Union soldiers buried here during the Civil War, about 4,000 unknown Union soldiers here during the war, and then they buried 117 Confederates here after the war was over, Confederate veterans. So we're going to walk around here and check out some of the grave areas. They buried the Union soldiers state by state, and so we'll check out a few of the states here, that Ohio and New York for starters. Also, as a teaser for a few minutes from now, I'm going to show you the graves of Pat Conroy's father and mother, and also the subject of his first book was a Lieutenant Colonel Courvoisier from the Citadel. His first book was called The Boo, so anybody out there who's a Pat Conroy fan would be interested in seeing those graves and hearing a little bit more about that. And this is pretty cool because I'm getting a angle your camera up a bit. Okay, the top third. Okay. Gotcha. Okay, thanks, Chris. The National Cemetery here started in 1863. They were burying the Union soldiers state by state. So over here we're going to take a look at the Ohio section. And they're all the smaller, shorter markers from that period. And you can read here the name of the soldier, number 680 from Ohio. All of these soldiers in this area were Union dead who were buried here during the Civil War. Now, interesting story about that. I'm a tour guide here in Beaufort, and a few months ago I had a couple on the tour with their children, and after the tour the wife told me that she worked for Ancestry.com, and there's a building in downtown Beaufort that has walls, that I had mentioned this on the tour, has walls. It was a Union hospital, and on the walls there were writings of Union soldiers who were hospitalized there. And so we went upstairs and took pictures of all the walls. This is the New York section here. Andrew Chisholm, New York, number 2642. So we went upstairs in this house and took pictures of all of the soldiers' names and all, and she went back and did research and found that five of the soldiers' names on the walls in this house were actually, she found their life histories. One of them was a 15-year-old drummer boy from Maryland, had signed up for the war, and he was hospitalized, and she had his entire history and wrote a blog about it for Ancestry.com, so that was pretty cool. Now the trees out here are fabulous. A lot of live oaks, a lot of Spanish moss, and also a lot of cedar trees as well. And they've really done a nice job of maintaining this. The management here encourages tour companies to come through the cemetery on a regular basis. And so we like to give tours here. I'm gonna check out a couple stones here that are different than the name of the state. Say USCT, Abraham Metzger, USCT. To be honest, or GT maybe, I'm not sure exactly what that means. Not Coast Guard. That was a section, that was another section of Union soldiers buried here. Let's see. Chris says, I'm here too, so that's a good thing. This thing is working. It's a miracle that I got it working without Chris physically being here in Beaufort, South Carolina to help me figure that out. By the way, recently, and I gave a walking tour and a golf cart tour of Beaufort, I found out why Beaufort, South Carolina is pronounced Beaufort. We know that Beaufort, North Carolina, spelled the same way, was the British way to spell it, but it turns out that I ran into a professor who's written volumes 2 and volume 3 of Beaufort County history. They're both about 2 inches thick. His name is Steve Wise, and he was walking his dogs downtown Beaufort. And I asked him about the pronunciation. He said that it wasn't French that the Beaufort sound came from, because in French it'd be pronounced Beaufort, but actually instead it was the Norman French from back in the Middle Ages. And there's a word that sounds like beau, like beautiful. Now, as I mentioned, they did bury, let's see here. Here they did bury 117 Confederate veterans here after the war was over. And you know, Confederate Memorial Day is a South Carolina state holiday still. They close all the state offices on Monday of that week. And here, they actually have a couple of small Confederate battle flags that appeared this morning. So usually the cemetery people gather those up because they're not really in vogue anymore. And let's see, Shannon says, Google says United States Colored Troops. You know, we keep changing the names, but that's a very good point. So these are all Confederate veterans buried here after the war. For instance, this one here says J. Provors, Confederate soldier, 6323. This one here, he was in the Tennessee and the CSA, Confederate States of America. This one here also Confederate States of America from South Carolina. And this gentleman here, A.L. Mills, was from Cobb's Guard. And so they're all the grave markers here are from Confederate veterans buried here after the war was over. None during, because Beaufort was obviously occupied by the Union at that point. Now, I talked about unnamed or unknown Union soldiers. Each of them got their own burial spot. And by the way, the plots here. And so these blocks here represent unknown Union soldiers buried here during the war. So if we look at this one here, the only thing we know about him was he was number 6480. And here we have 6479 and so on. Almost 4,000 Union soldiers buried here during the war. And so they all each got their own individual burial spots. As you can see, there are lots and lots of them. Now over on this side, these are more recent burials, all the larger gravestones. And from this direction, you'll see some of them have names, some of them don't. So this one here, for instance, says Elizabeth Jenkins, his daughter. This one here has nothing written on the backside. The reason for that is because the veterans' names are written from the front side, and we're coming in from the front of the cemetery. So all of the veterans' names are on this side of the stone. And these are here, this gentleman is buried here in 1959. He was a cook in the U.S. Army World War I. And so you'll see that all of these do have names on them of the veterans buried here. A lot of them were, if you go back to the backside here, a lot of them were buried without a spouse because many of them died at a young age. And so a lot of these soldiers here or veterans were buried without. They have one to two burials of veterans every day. They've done a major expansion project here at the National Cemetery. So if you look back through the break in the wall over here, and I'll get closer to it later on, they've buried a lot of veterans back there in the past 10 years and have done really a major expansion. So it's almost 30,000 veterans are buried here in the cemetery. Probably the most unusual person buried here was during World War II. The U.S. Coast Guard captured a German U-boat off the coast of Cape Lookout, North Carolina, and when they were taking the prisoners back to Charleston, and so they buried him here in the National Cemetery. All they knew about him was his name and his date of death, and so he's probably the strangest person buried here. Again, we're walking through all the unknown Union soldiers area here, and then they've mixed in some more recent burials. This gentleman here in 1995, for instance. Let's see what it says on the, Chris says, black soldiers died at a much higher rate than white soldiers during the Civil War relative to their numbers. Vicksburg. Thanks for that, Chris. Now, it turns out that in 1987, they were digging a foundation on Folly Beach just north of here, south of Charleston, and they found the remains of up to 19 African-American soldiers, colored soldiers, who were buried there in a grave. And in 1989, they brought them back here to Beaufort, and here is the plaque here. I'll read a little bit of it. Memorial Day, May 29th, 1989, the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Michael Dukakis, and descendants of the African-American Civil War volunteers of the 54th and 55th Infantry. By the way, the 54th in the movie Glory was Denzel Washington's group, and the infantry regiments and the 5th Cavalry Regiment of Massachusetts, accompanied by distinguished citizens of the Commonwealth, came on this day to Beaufort National Veterans Cemetery to honor the members of the Black 55th Massachusetts Regiment. That was a sister regiment to the 54th of Denzel Washington portraying, whose remains were found on Folly Island, now we call it Folly Beach, South Carolina, 1987, and reinterred this day with full military honors befitting befitting American soldiers. Duty well performed, this is a quote here by Governor John Andrew, 1865, duty well performed, glory and reward won. Now on this one here it says, these hallowed grounds hold the remains of at least 19 black Union soldiers, 55th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment, who lost their lives on Folly Island in the siege of Charleston during the winter encampment of November 1863 to February 1864 Civil War. And their earthly remains lay long forgotten until rediscovered in May 1987. They were reburied at this site by the community of Beaufort, May 29th, 1989. So this is the final resting place for the 19 African American or colored soldiers who fought with the Massachusetts 55th. And this is the spot where they would have had. Now, the governor, it said on the stone that Governor of Massachusetts, Michael Dukakis, was here, but also Denzel Washington and some of the other actors in the movie Glory came in their Civil War Union uniforms, and they were the honor guard or the color guard for the reburial ceremony back in 1989. So that was pretty cool. Why is it covered with pennies? You know, that's a good point. A lot of military burial sites, for instance, we're about to see in a few minutes the burial place of the great Santini, Don Conroy, Pat's father. So it's a good point. You've got all the coins, pennies across the top. And to be honest, I hadn't even noticed that today. But the pennies are a military show of respect, is my understanding. His father Don's gravesite, and it will show you, and it will have coins there. And their different coins have different meanings as well. Now, I was going to go outside the original wall. This wall here is the wall from the original cemetery, and they had a major expansion project 10 years ago. And so all of the veterans buried outside of the wall here were buried here in the last 10 years. And when we get out here, I'll pan around and show you. It's amazing how many different, how many veterans are buried here just in the last 10 years alone. So here you go, all the way around here. You've got the expansion project. By the way, straight ahead, that is where they hold the memorial service for the veterans when they're buried here, and the family and friends come here. I have a friend, Denny Coe, who died about 8 years ago or so, and I went to a service here. But then look around this way, and you'll see how many veterans we've lost in the last 10 years. It's just totally amazing that, that they have that. Let me show you something funny about that I noticed a few months ago. If you look over here, these stones here are, the plots are 8 feet by 4 feet. And so, I'm 6'5", I would fit in one of these. But one day I was driving through and I noticed these are about half the distance. And what it turns out is, this is where they give you a choice. As a veteran, if you're buried here, you can be buried here if you're cremated. And also your spouse can be buried with you. So you have a choice of being buried here if you're cremated, or right over there, there's a columbarium wall right in the center of the picture there. And that's where you can also be in the wall if you've been cremated. Now, if you think you might have a relative here, to the left of that wall is a brick building, and it has a little ATM machine looking thing there. And you can type in the first name and last name of somebody if you think their relative is here, and it'll give you the coordinates. Now, when I speak of coordinates, if you look at all of the stones here, this particular one here says C2, number 204. So they're numerically listed. I don't know why that keeps showing up on the top. So this is section C2. So here's the next one is C2, 205, 206, and so on. And so it'll give you the coordinates, and then you can come and find your relative or whoever you think you have. And again, some of these veterans are buried with their spouse. If their name is on it from this direction, that means the spouse and the veteran buried here. And then from this direction, all of the markers have a name on here of the person buried, of the veteran on this side. And sometimes you'll have two veterans buried, husband and wife, in the same spot. All right, now we're going to walk around the corner here. By the way, you'll see a lot of the trees here are beautiful with Spanish moss. With Spanish moss is neither Spanish nor moss. It's actually a epiphyte. Gets its nutrition from the wind and from the breeze, whatever blows in the wind, and it's part of the pineapple family around here. I had a customer on a tour one time. This tree here is called a crepe myrtle, and they thought that the Spanish moss grew out of the crepe myrtle. That was how it grew, but actually the Spanish moss is a separate plant from the crepe myrtle tree. Wow, you're getting all my alerts on there. Sorry, Chris, I turned everything off, I thought, but we'll do a better job next time. All right, now we're going to walk down this way and see the final resting place of Donald Conroy, Pat Conroy, the author's father. Pat Conroy moved to Beaufort when he was 15, had already lived in 13 different cities at that point, and came here and became, he's actually my favorite author, but became a well-known author. Lived in Beaufort on and off for the rest of his life. He also lived in Atlanta, lived in San Francisco, and also in Rome, Italy for a while. If you want to read about his days in Rome, Italy, the book Beach Music that he wrote is about his days in Rome. And by the way, I know a lot of Pat Conroy trivia. It turns out that the movie rights to Beach Music, because it's never been made into a movie, are owned by somebody very famous, and it turns out to be Brad Pitt. And for some reason, Brad Pitt hasn't made Beach Music into a movie yet. Let's see. Hi, Christine. Hi from Texas. This is pretty cool, Chris. I'll get the hang of it if I can just figure out how to turn it on in a timely manner. It's really cool to have comments and hellos from everybody too. I really like this. I can see why Chris is really enjoying doing this. All right, so we've got all of these veterans buried here. This is probably the most famous one. This is the final resting place of Pat Conroy's father, Don Conroy. And he was a colonel, U.S. Marine Corps. He was a pilot. and he served in World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Now, this is not the original stone they buried him here with. About a year ago, his daughter Kathy got a call, and they asked her if they could replace it because they wanted to put his medals on here. So if you look down here at the bottom, DFC and 2GS stands for Distinguished Flying Cross and 2 gold stars. And then AM is Aviator Medal and 4 gold stars. Now Kathy said, I'll let you go ahead and change the stone however you want to, but can you put the word "the" in front of Great Santini? And they said there's no room for it. We'd have to take the medals off of there. And so at that point, she said, oh, fine, just go ahead and make it like that. So it turns out that Pat Conroy's father buried here, and the last time I was here, there were actually some coins on the top of his. But at this point, maybe there's some on the ground. Yeah, here we go. Off. It is a Lincoln penny. And I don't see any others, but we'll put that back on the top there. Oh my. There we go. All right, now we're going to go see where Pat's mother was buried. And it turns out it's about 11 rows over from Pat's father. Now, only by the merit that she married another veteran is she buried here. And so Pat's mother, Frances M. for Margaret Peak Conroy, his wife, she died 14 years before his father, and she had married Captain Egan, but the M stands for Margaret, and she went by Peg. Now, about 2 weeks ago, I was out here giving my Pat Conroy tour, and wouldn't you know it, 2 of my friends came up, one of them Kathy Conroy, Pat's younger sister, and so my people on the tour got to ask her a few questions about Pat. And one of them was, did Pat's mother keep the Conroy name? Why didn't she take Captain Egan's name? And the answer is that she kept Captain Conroy's name because for the children and grandchildren. And so she decided not to take Captain Egan's name. But her second husband also served, just like her father, in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And he died in 1987, about 3 years after she did. He was a captain in the US Navy, John Thomas Egan. Now, when I was doing some research during the COVID days back in the fall, when there wasn't much else to do, because I stopped giving tours in March and didn't start back up until October, and we switched to the golf cart, which is a big hit, by the way. 8-passenger Yamaha golf cart, gasoline, and very quiet. But anyway, doing some research, I found out that this gentleman right here was buried here. Yeah, I need to read these. Gimbal party, yeah. The dates on the headstone. I'll have to go back, I can go back there and take a look. All right, so this gentleman here was the subject of Pat Conroy's first ever book called The Boo. And Lieutenant Colonel Nugent Courvoisier was the assistant commandant of cadets at the Citadel when Pat was a student there. And back then he was kind of like the dean of students. If you've seen the movie The Lords of Discipline, he was the one going around with a cigar in his mouth. And he got his nickname The Boo because when one of the cadets was out of line somehow, he would sneak up behind him and yell "boo" in their ear. And so that's where he got his nickname The Boo. Well, right after Pat finished the Citadel, The Boo was demoted from being essentially Commandant of Cadets assistant to being in charge of the laundry room and the lugging the cadets' luggage around. And so Pat wasn't happy about that. He worked with The Boo to write his first book, which he self-published, and it was called The Boo. And Pat paid $2,500 to the R.L. Bryan Company in Columbia, South Carolina to print 1,000 copies. I've got a friend who has a copy signed by The Boo about a year before The Boo died. And on the stone here, The Boo was born in October 19th, 1916, died April 30th, 2006 with a Bronze Star. And so he got it signed by Pat Conroy and The Boo, and it's worth over $10,000 now. Now here's a curious thing. All of the other gravestones here have a woman's name on the backside if the spouse is buried with the veteran. However, The Boo was preceded in death by his wife, and so his wife, he died in 2006. His wife is actually, she was a major in the U.S. Army, World War II, died in 1985, and he died years later in 2006. So for that reason, she died first, and so she's buried here and has the main front side of the stone. This is a curious section for me because on either side of the boo are unknown Union soldiers, and they bury them 2 spots apart. So in this general area here, they actually kind of alternated unknown Union soldier, and then somebody buried this person here in 2011, for instance, and get the dates off the stone there. And I really need the plug. Oh, thanks, Chris. So Pat's mother buried is, here we go. So Frances M. Peake Conroy, and she was born in January 4th, 1925, died of cancer November 17th, 1984. And that was 14 years before Pat's father died. He died in 1998. Now just take a look at the trees. There's a nice breeze out here today, and you see a lot of Spanish moss there in the trees. There's also resurrection fern. Let me walk over here to this tree and I'll show you. We haven't had rain in a few weeks, and so the resurrection fern actually turns totally brown, and it can lose up to 97% of its water content and still be alive. It kind of goes dormant. And so at this point, you've got the resurrection fern on the tree here. We'll get closer and closer. And it looks totally brown and totally dead, but it's not. If we had a rainstorm today, it would be as green as the grass by tomorrow, within 24 hours later. So it's maybe hard to see on the video here, but right up there, it looks like weeds almost, but it's actually fern and turns bright green. Let's see here. Yeah, see, the boo's wife was in the military, yes. Let's see here. So it turns out that veterans can be buried here, and also their spouses can be buried here, and sometimes if a child predeceases the veteran, they can also be buried here as well. Let's see, Grant insisted on being buried not in Arlington so he could be interred with his wife. Gotcha. So in the military cemetery here, it's only veterans and their spouses and children. So it's possible, and the children have to predecease them, otherwise they have to be veterans to be buried here. Now if you come here to the National Cemetery for July 4th, or if you come here on Memorial Day, all of the gravestones get a American flag. But if you come here for in December 19th this past year, they did the wreaths across America. And so every stone got a wreath. And also 2 years ago, they had so many extra that even the spouse got a wreath. So they had a wreath on the front and the back if the spouse and the veteran were buried together. Let's go check a couple of the funny things that people write on these gravestones. This one says, "Rest with me. Rest in peace." I need to learn how to control this thing. "Loving memory." "Jesus loves me." "Together again, Reverend." This one here says, "Henry Buckner served as a corporal, U.S. Marine Corps, Vietnam," and at the bottom it says, "Wait for me." Let's see if his wife is not buried here. So he is all alone here, died in 1998. Let's see if there are any other. Here's an American flag here. Some of them have funny things like, this one here says, "Loved by all." Some have funny things like "Gone fishing." That's kind of what I was looking for the funny things. Here it says, "Beloved husband, father, and grandfather." And here, this gentleman served in the Navy in Vietnam and the Persian Gulf, died in 1995. Here we go, "Beloved husband." I haven't seen anybody who's gone fishing yet. This one here, Ulysses Ziegler, served in the Army in Vietnam, and his says, "Unforgettable." I don't think they had enough letters because I'm not sure they spelled forgettable correctly. "Beloved husband, father, and pop-pop." So let's look at some of the backsides. Is that on a lot of them, all they say is his wife. Let me see if I can find some of those. Maybe the newer ones actually have something more creative on here, but for a long time that's all it said. For instance, on Pat Conroy's mother's grave, it says his wife. Oh, here we go. I'm not doing, you know what, the microphone cord is not on me correctly and it's pulling. So that's not a good, I'll get the hang of this next time. Here we go, beloved mother, loving memory, his wife, here you go. So Virginia, his wife, that's all she gets. Actually, she got loving memory too. But let's go find some more of the Civil War Union graves, because there are different sections out here. I think we're coming up to the Indiana section. I've not actually seen anything on the backside of the Union markers. Oh, here we go, Pennsylvania. I actually grew up in Pennsylvania, so that's kind of cool that I finally found this, because I haven't. Here, this is W.H. Grinder, Pennsylvania, number 4454. B. Potts, Pennsylvania. You know, Chris, I think you're right. You know how to, you definitely know how to control the gimbal a lot smoother than I do, but I'm working on it. Shannon says, how many gravestones are here? The total is almost 30,000. And like I said, they had the major expansion project out in the back, beyond the original fence here. You know, there's actually also a sporting field across the street from the cemetery, and that's where they filmed the Forrest Gump scene where Forrest Gump rides round and round on the snapper lawnmower, getting the field ready for the big game. And then the next day he plays for Bear Bryant, and it wasn't in Alabama, it was actually filmed at Walterboro, at the Colleton County High School in Walterboro, about 45 minutes from here. So about 80% of Forrest Gump filmed here in and around Beaufort. So this is all the Pennsylvania section. That's pretty cool, because I don't have any relatives here, but there's probably no way to know. But looks like here, oh, also Pennsylvania. So lots and lots of Pennsylvania. Practice makes perfect. That's right. 14,000. If they're, no, it's bigger, it's more than 14,000. Union was about 8,000, and then they've added a lot in the last 10 years. So this is a huge Pennsylvania contingent here. It's amazing. Had no idea that there were so many from Pennsylvania buried here. I grew up about 60 miles from Gettysburg, but we didn't really discuss the Civil War in class. I remember one day in Mr. Bixby's 9th grade history class, we talked about Gettysburg for about 45 minutes. And so at that point, that's all I remember learning in high school. These are all Pennsylvania. And then when I moved down to South Carolina to go to college, I went to a square dance the first night on campus. Oh, here we go. This is an F-35B jet flying over top of the cemetery. You might be able to... It's a little windy, so the F-35B jet that the Marine Corps has is the one can take off and land vertically. So I was driving by one day a couple years ago, and there was one of them hovering, and it was kind of cool. It looked like a UFO almost. But this is really, we get a lot of jets flying over. 3 weeks ago, I was giving a tour of the National Cemetery show here, Beaufort Air Show every year in April, and they canceled it. But the Blue Angels decided they wanted to come practice here anyway, so they gave us a 3-day air show, and they were flying all over the downtown, and especially over the National Cemetery here. And they had about 6 different Blue Angels jets, so that was really, really cool. And they gave the to the Massachusetts section, because they have a large contingency over there as well. And does anyone have any other questions? It's really a beautiful cemetery if you ever get a chance to come here. Lots of people will drive through Beaufort and never stop here, never even kind of realize that it's here. And so it's just an amazing Started again by Abraham Lincoln in 1863. Now here you'll see more of the unknown Union soldiers. And Chris there was saying, Bill, tilt the camera back up again. I can read Chris's mind now. And it's because this cable for my microphone is too short. I need to do a better job of miking myself next time. But all of the unknown soldiers. The weather today, Shannon, it's been beautiful. You know, the interesting thing, it's 81 degrees, by the way. Interesting thing, as a tour guide, I've been giving tours for the last 5 years. I started the business thinking I would hire tour guides, and then 5 years ago kind of jumped into it and really enjoy giving tours of Beaufort. There's so much history here. And so I would go from my air-conditioned house to my air-conditioned car, to my air-conditioned van, give the tour, get back in my air-conditioned car, and back to the air-conditioned house. Never really knew how wonderful the weather was here in Beaufort. And here we go. These gentlemen here are from Maine. His name was EJMP Portuguef. 1806 was his number. And the gimbal's kind of taking over. These are all the contingency from Maine. Anyway, so at a certain point, back in October when I started giving tours, I was like, oh, it's amazing how wonderful the weather here is, Beaufort, because I was outside every day giving tours in the golf cart. There were about 2 weeks in January where it was so cold I had to buy blankets for my tour takers. And then 2 weeks in February where it rained for 2 weeks, and so that was not a very good time to give tours. But then come March, April, May, I had my best April ever as in the tour business. You know, we have a lot of humidity. Oh, low battery, that's not right. We have a lot of humidity here, but with the breeze, you don't really think about it too much. And these are some cedar trees all over in the grove here. And these don't have nearly as much Spanish moss on them. It's possible that they take the moss off of these manually, because I would think they'd have some Spanish moss on them. I want to show you a funny stone over here. When I take tours, that's when I learn by the questions that people ask. And they really like to ask some strange questions sometimes. But in this case, they asked me if over here was the Navy SEAL section. And so they said they were out here the day before. And so I said, oh, let's go over and check it out. And so I got out of the van, came over here, checked out this brown stone that we're walking to, and it says SEALs on it. And so at that point, if you only checked out this side, you might think it's the Navy SEAL section. We're almost there. So here, if you can read it with the shadow, it says SEALs on it. So at that point, walk around the other side, and it turns out that it was Mr. and Mrs. SEAL. And apparently Wade Seals was in the Army of Vietnam, and he's got a little picture of a helicopter on here. So I don't know if he was a pilot. CW4, is that Chief Warden 4 maybe? I'm not, but he lived to 2004, served in Vietnam, and his wife died. Born in 1958. She's probably still alive then. But not the Navy SEAL section, just the SEAL family buried here. Man, the gimbal's taken off again. How does this thing work? I guess I turned too fast. What's the deal, Chris? So humidity's not too bad here in Beaufort because of the breeze. Now, I've gotten out of the car in Charleston over the years, and they don't have as much of a breeze. And the next thing you know, you're drenched. And it gets really sweaty really fast. Man, what is it with all these things on the screen? I'm gonna walk out here and show you a marker. By the way, we have a lot of palmetto trees here, and it's a state tree known as the sable palm, and it's actually also on the state flag. I covered that on the walking tour, I think. But love the palmetto tree. They actually credited it for saving the early state of South Carolina by surrounding an unfinished fort with palmetto logs. And Now here's something interesting. We have the POW MIA flag flies here every day. See if I can turn it up here to the American flag. And I definitely need to practice with the gimbal. Right, Chris? Yeah, the sable palm is a palmetto tree. Is also known as palmetto tree, and it's a shorter version of a palm. If you look at them, they kind of have the crosshatched look at the top. Sometimes they have the crosshatched look all the way down, and it's just natural that they grow like that. And because they saved the early state of South Carolina from the British cannonballs, they credit the sable palm palmetto tree with saving the early state, and it's on the state flag. I'll show you one more marker out here. By the way, I want to give a big shout out to Chris, because without Chris, none of us would be able to give these tours. And he came to Beaufort often enough, I decided to trade in my Android phone for the same iPhone 11 he had. And so at this point, this is my first broadcast, and getting it started was a little bit tough. But thanks to Chris telling me no pressure, we went ahead and got it started. And I hope everyone's enjoying seeing a little bit of the National Cemetery. I'm going to show you one more marker down here, and then I think we'll call it a day. Well, I'll be happy to answer any questions anybody has. This is Boundary Street, by the way, the northern boundary of the city of Beaufort. And this is the original brick wall that was built around the National Cemetery. And like I said, they expanded beyond it out in the back for all the veterans they have out there now. Talking about the Spanish moss, so the early Model T, Model A Ford, the Ford Motor Company decided to use Spanish moss as a cheap way to pad the cushions. And then they had to have a recall because Spanish moss comes with a little red bug called a chigger. They're the ones that they get under your skin. You have to use toenail or fingernail polish and dab it on there to suffocate them. Thanks, Chris. I need to point it up. I'll go ahead and read this because it's kind of small to read, and also I shouldn't have those messages on there. Let's see here. 1st South Carolina Infantry of African descent. The 1st South Carolina Volunteer Infantry Regiment was raised from Sea Island slaves living around Port Royal. Elements of the regiment were formed on Hilton Head, May 1862. In August 1862, the regiment was reorganized near Beaufort at the Smith Plantation. It was commanded by the noted abolitionist Thomas Higginson, who led the regiment on raids along the Georgia coast. Anyway, I'll give you a little teaser to come here to Beaufort and read the rest of the sign. And actually says the same thing on the backside. By the way, because of Beaufort's unique history of being occupied by the Union, is that better? Beaufort occupied by the Union for almost 4 years, from November 7th, 1861 till the end of the war, Civil War. 5 years ago, the National Park Service selected Beaufort for the Reconstruction Era National Monument, and 2 years ago it got elevated on the same day as Fort Sumter up in Charleston to National Park status. It's actually called the Reconstruction Era National Historical Park. It's not your typical park where you go and you I'm trying to read and walk at the same time. Not the national park where you go like Yellowstone or Yosemite, where you go to you go hiking, camping in a particular area. It's really more a connected dot. National Park Service Ranger headquarters. We have park rangers now in town, and you go there and they have free walking tours to Robert Small's house every day around 11. And also out at the Penn Center, where they started educating the newly freed slaves in 1862. They have a new museum of Reconstruction out there as well at Darrah Hall. And so it's really kind of neat to see park rangers walking around town. I've got one former tour guide of mine who became a park ranger the first few years they did it. And so I joined him on a tour one time, and he said, "Bill, you give the tour." So that was kind of fun. But the history here in Beaufort is so unique, from the antebellum period to the Civil War to Reconstruction, that we really, it's really a cool place to come visit. And a lot of people actually retire here, especially military. By the way, the military is the #1 industry here in town. We got 3 military installations. You got the Marine Corps Air Station. They're the ones, back in the Great Santini day, they had the F-4 Phantom, but now they have the F-35B. And then you have Parris Island, that's the Marine Corps Recruit Depot. They call it the MCRD, and that's where they've been training Marine Corps recruits for since before World War II. Well, they started out there in 1915 actually. And then we also have a U.S. Naval Hospital. So the military budget contributes over $2 billion with the B dollars to the Beaufort economy. And then #2 here is tourism. We get a lot of tourists coming to Fripp Island out on the beach. We got Hunting Island State Park. That was Vietnam and Forrest Gump at the lagoon out there. Also at the lagoon out there, they filmed the torture scene from G.I. Jane with Demi Moore. And she and her ex-husband, Bruce Willis, stayed here for a while. Let's see, we've been going about 40 plus minutes. And Chris, I think I'm at the point where, unless there are any other questions, I'd kind of like to put a wrap on this one. And it'll be fun for me to go back and watch the comments because I know I missed a few of them. But thank you so much everybody for learning a little bit more about the Beaufort National Cemetery. And I've got plans to do some other, to go into more detail than we go on a regular tour. And so with that, I think I'll go ahead and say it's time to head on home and have a glass of red wine and relax a little bit. So thank you everybody, and appreciate everyone watching and learning. And I promise the next time, technology-wise, I'll be better. Look at this gimbal's out of control now. I'll be better ready to go here for the whole thing. So very good. Ross Brian Henderson says, thanks Bill, take care. I like the thumbs up, appreciate that. And it's been a learning experience. Giving the tour is the easy part. Getting the technology to work, but I do have my iPhone 11, but figuring out, I wanted to buy one just like Chris's because I watched him when he was doing all the technology, and I said, well, it's time to figure out how to do it. And the gimbal is, look at that, see, and I'm not supposed to have my Gmail showing up on the screen there. By the way, that was WTSO, Wine Till It's Sold. I buy wine from them every once in a while. If anyone's a wine drinker, WTSO. But I will get better on the gimbal, and thank you so much. Soft shell crab. I've not heard anyone talk about soft shell crab in the last couple of weeks, Chris, so at this point, I think the season has passed us by. Most places, restaurants offer them until they run out, and I've not heard anyone offering them lately. But thanks everybody. It's a nice cool breeze here. Come visit Beaufort when you get a chance. I have to tell you that tourism here is alive and well and back to normal. Everyone has had the vaccine, and today, actually for the past week, I've had mostly people from Ohio and Indiana, and they're coming here, and you can't see the emails. So thank you, Shannon. I keep wondering about all that. I'll tell you a quick story before I go. So Hilton Head Island was developed by Charles Fraser back in the 1960s when they really started marketing it, and he said, we've only got a limited marketing budget for Hilton Head, so let's see, where's 1 day's drive from here? Because we're going to market Hilton Head as 1 day drive from somewhere and 2 days drive to get to Florida. And they ended up picking the state of Ohio. And so most of the people who come to Hilton Head are from Ohio, Indiana, that general area. And it's kind of interesting because a couple of years ago they did a poll to see who the favorite NCAA football team was on Hilton Head. Now here in South Carolina, we got 2 main teams. We've got the Clemson, and here, I'll go flip the screen. How's that? There we go. There you go. Thanks, Chris. That's a good idea. So you got the Clemson Tigers national champs, and then you also have the Carolina Gamecocks, University of South Carolina. And that, I got my master's degree in international business from there. So they took a poll on Hilton Head. And oh, hi there, everybody. It's kind of cool to see everybody on the screen here. So it turns out they took a vote on Hilton Head and who was the #1 college football team on Hilton Head. Not the Tigers, not the Gamecocks. Turns out it was the Ohio State Buckeyes. And so the Buckeyes, basically everyone from Hilton Head over there who comes to visit and has bought homes since the 60s, a lot of them are from Ohio or the general area. #1, see, I need to lengthen the cord here. This is just not done well. But anyway, turns out that the #1 NFL team is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And when you drive around Beaufort County, you'll see a lot of Pittsburgh Steelers bumper stickers and window stickers on let's see here. Oh, Chris says, just realized I was watching like a minute behind the rest of you. That's interesting. I'm going to figure this out because this is really a lot of fun, and love getting the comments from everybody. That really, it's good to get the live questions because you can answer them right there on the spot. And so, I'll tell you what, Chris usually says to whoever he's walking with, they get to touch the end button, and since I'm here, I'll give myself permission to push the end button. And I really appreciate everyone being here, and stay tuned for the next time here in Beaufort, South Carolina. Thanks, everybody.